Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for April 30th, 2025. Well, as you've probably heard, there's a large confrontation emerging between the Europeans and Russia, in particular over the commemoration on May 8th and May 9th of the victory over fascism. Now, President Putin yesterday proposed a 3-day truce on those days, and this has been ridiculed in the media. It's been rejected by the Ukrainians and rebuffed as well by European Union bureaucrats who call it a stunt or a trick. Now, there's a deeper truth here as to what's going on, which is that the European Union is siding with the fascists. And this is not merely a rhetorical position, but you have to look deeper at the question of what the European Union represents today. Why have they rejected working together with Donald Trump to end the war in Ukraine? Why are they moving to stop the normalization of relations between the U.S. and Russia? And why will they not join the Russians in commemorating a victory over fascism 80 years ago? Now, the deeper secret here is that World War II was a continuation of World War I, that is, of British geopolitics, the deployment by forces allied with the City of London to prevent a German-Russian rapprochement. At the end of the World War I, at the Versailles Treaty, there was an effort made by the Russians and the Germans called the Rapallo Treaty to establish new relations of collaboration on trade and economics. Walter Rathenau, the German foreign minister, was the leader in this push. And shortly after the agreement was signed, he was assassinated, something which has happened over and over and over to leaders who are proposing an alliance of the Europeans and the Eurasian countries. Now, the British role in the rise of Hitler is worth noting as well. But it was not just the British, it was Wall Street corporatists, such as the Harrimans and the Bush family, the Rockefellers, the corporate trusts, working together with Montague Norman, the head of the Bank of England. This corporatist alliance rather would have a Hitler in Germany to fight against the Russians, as well as to suppress the potential of Germany as an economic power. And we see the same thing today. The desire from the international cartels is to break Russia apart, steal their resources, and use the war in Ukraine to weaken them, as former Defense Secretary Austin said over and over and over. Now, Trump came in and he said he's going to end this war and is attempting to get an agreement. And what's the response from Europe? Starmer of the United Kingdom and Macron of France are trying to create a army, a European army to fight against Russia. And this at a time when Europe is practically bankrupt, its industries are falling apart, infrastructure is collapsing. Take for the case yesterday of the shutdown of the electric grid in Portugal and Spain. Now, no one knows exactly what caused it yet, but immediately, what was the line coming out? Putin did it. Cyber warfare against the West. The idea of creating an enemy image of Russia and Putin. Why? In order to spend hundreds of billions of dollars in rearmament. You need an enemy image to do that, so you convince the population that the reason there's austerity, the reason the infrastructure can't be funded, is that you need the money to prepare for a war against Russia. And it's not only blaming Putin, now it's blaming Trump as well. So you have the rearmament motion underway led by Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Council, Kaja Kallas, who's supposedly the foreign minister of the European Union, who said there should be no participation by European states in the May 9th commemoration of the victory over fascism taking place in Moscow. Instead, she said, go to Kiev. Now, think of the irony there. The government in Kiev was brought into existence, the current government, with the Maidan coup in February 2014. Playing a leading role in that coup were Western networks, neoconservatives, corporate cartel operatives, people like Victoria Nuland, George Soros, working together with Ukrainian Nazis of Svoboda, of the Pravi sector, the Banderites. Remember, Stefan Bandera was a leader of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which was a pro-Hitler movement in Ukraine during World War II. So the irony today is that the European Union, at least the bureaucrats, are allied with the Nazis in Ukraine and refuse to join with Russia to commemorate the victory in Europe in 1945. And keep in mind, the Russians suffered more than any other country, with somewhere more than 26 million, 27 million people dying as a result of the World War II and the German invasion. So here you have an ongoing collapse in Europe of the economy. No government is popular. In fact, well, actually some are. The ones that are not lined up with Ursula von der Leyen. You have the proposal for a so-called financial bazooka. Hundreds of billions of dollars for war. Now, an example of the craziness here is there's a report from yesterday of a student protest at a high school in a German city where the Bundeswehr, the German army, was there to recruit high school students. And a small group of students put up a sign that said, Bildung statt bombs. In other words, education, not bombs. The students, their demonstration was shut down and they were given 3 weeks suspension. So while they're out there campaigning for more funds for education and against war, they're disciplined. That's the situation in Germany today. Now, what has Putin been calling for that's so controversial? A new security architecture for Europe. NATO has outlived its purpose. There's no enemy unless you want to create an enemy, which is what the NATO forces are trying to do. And so what he's saying is we don't just need a pause in fighting, we need a durable agreement which provides for neutrality for Ukraine, security concerns represented by Russia would be met by Europe, and that would be the basis for cooperation. The biggest obstacle right now, it's not just Zelensky, it's the European Union. Now, there are reports from some, such as the Diane, that they think that Starmer is using this to reverse Brexit. Well, there may be some truth to that, because this is an attempt to bring Britain back into the fold. But in fact, Britain never left the fold in terms of the economic policy, because much of that was continued to be run through the City of London. Now, the consolidation of Europe could include the addition of Canada, where you have a Europhile, Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of England, who is just now elected the Prime Minister of Canada. So what happens if you bring the United Kingdom back, you bring Canada in? You just consolidate a force for war, a force for austerity, a force for corporate control. Now, this will be one of the topics taken up today in the discussion that Helga Zepp-LaRouche is going to have with Diane Sare. This will be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 o'clock in Europe. And I would urge people to find the time, if you can't join live, listen to it later. Because Helga Zepp-LaRouche has been at the forefront of the fight for a new security architecture for Europe. And in the meantime, the fight that we're taking up today is one against the pro-fascist networks running today's European Union.